So I just wanted to record a little prologue to this war video and say a huge thank you to everyone who has subscribed to my channel in the past couple months. I just hit 500 subscribers, and that's a really cool feeling. It's great that y'all are enjoying hearing me just talk about fights in this game that we all seem to really enjoy. I hope I can keep putting out content that does that for you. And now on to the main thing. Hey all, so unexpectedly, last war of the season here. I'll talk more about that later. But this is all Killmonger and Tigra. So I really had a ton of fun this war. We were up against 4 Loki, where I have a ton of friends, and so this was kind of a fun war. We actually had a bet on it, where our BG3 versus their BG3, whoever performed better. If their BG3 performed better, I would have to change my profile picture to Corvus Glaive, which would have killed me a little bit because I despise using him. And if our BG3 performed better, then Vega, who as many of you know used to be in BG3 here and is a good friend, has to change his profile picture to Stealth Spider-Man, who he is not at all a fan of. So starting off with this Guardian fight here, this is obviously a pretty good placement because to avoid the Furies getting out of control, you have to throw specials, and Guardian can auto-block specials. However, he only can auto-block after 12 seconds when he gains his first force field charge. That is completely okay because we can push him to a bar of power before that 12 seconds happens, throw our first special because of power struggle, and then he will throw his first special, and then we will get True Strike, and we will have no problem throwing specials for the rest of the fight. And there you go. So he did get 1 Fury, and he may get an... Yeah, I think I mess up later in here and throw a heavy when I don't need to. And he gets another couple, but Killmonger has pretty good block proficiency and high armor, and Guardian, unlike some other options that you see on this node, is not going to crit through block. So if those Furies get out of control, it will absolutely hurt. See, there it is. He threw it as soon as he stood up. That was a mistake on my part. I shouldn't have heavied. And maybe I got thrown off by the fact that the light strike counter is actually missing. I don't know what's up with that. But even though he has 4 Furies, we're not going to take much damage on block. See, that was only 190 on a parry. And this fight just goes down. A reminder that True Strike does not just stop the auto block, it also lets Killmonger ignore Guardian's high armor rating. So even though Guardian has some resistance to both crits and to bleed damage, we are still doing a reliably high amount of damage because we are bypassing his armor. So next up we have this Immortal Hulk here. This is an excellent placement for this particular defender. It's actually where ours is in BG3 as well. And the main reason is because if you let those Furies get out of control, and then he goes into his unblockable phase, and you start worrying about brute force, then you go in and try and finish him off, and now he has a ton of Furies, and you can die very quickly. This is especially exacerbated by the fact that some of the popular options for him, such as Omega Red, do a lot of damage in a form that is very efficiently converted to Gamma. I've taken this fight before with Killmonger, and I really like him for it because, like Nick, who's another good option here, he does a significant amount of damage in the form of bleed, which Immortal Hulk does not as efficiently convert into Gamma. So the idea here is fully to just play the node. I am counting my combos, and where possible, throwing specials before I empty any of them so he doesn't gain any Furies. He did get 1 early on, but that's okay. We can afford a couple of those. Notice I'm making sure to get in one combo that both starts and ends with a medium so that I can start my last combo with a medium and have only used 3. I consider that very important. So at this point, I've given him Furies twice, I have basically no power, and I realize that I'm probably about to give him another one if I keep playing the way I have, and while that's probably okay, I would prefer not to. So I'm going to throw the heavy like I normally do, and now, yeah, this is where I do it. I just parry a few times, because that gives me enough extra power to get to my next special without giving him a third Fury. Now, I don't get hit again here, so I could have afforded the third Fury, but it's better to just keep him under control, right? Because like I said, if brute force starts ticking down and you have to make some moves to get it off you, you really don't want him to be juiced up to the point where he can take you out in a single combo. Anyways, due to general tankiness and bleed damage, like I said, Killmonger's a great option there. So here we have Hulkbuster on Ebb and Flow Intercept, and I chose to use Tigra in part because I just love her for Ebb and Flow Intercept, because it is extremely easy to intercept with her unblockable special too, and then you get that Fury and you just do a ton of damage. I also had done my duels, and I knew that it was possible to heavy counter both Hulkbuster's heavy and especially his L1. Now, I knew we were going to get that first shock, but the plan here, see there, I just wasn't confident of the evade counter on the special one, and rather than risk doing it late, I decided to back off. And I guess I did it again there because I got surprised by dropping a parry. But the idea here is to heavy counter after his special one and after his heavy, and to keep neutralize up on him as much as possible so that when he tries to gain his next armor, he won't. This would also keep the unblockable buff off him, which doesn't really matter since we're going to be dodging it anyway, but it would be one more rupture. And when Tigra doesn't stop it, and therefore doesn't get the rupture, then it's a short duration buff that feeds her Mystic Dispersion and therefore gives her power. So either way, we win. Now, we do want to be careful because see how much damage that shock is doing? This is why we were trying to keep them off him, because he does have the Sadist node, so he's gaining extra power for every damaging debuff on him, which includes Rupture, and that's why we lost so much health there. Because the rhythm of the fight got away from us and he was able to get some armors up, those were then turned back into shocks, but they were turned into shocks with his attack rating boosted through the roof by Sadist. So, a bit of a risky option in terms of, like, you can lose health there, but I still think a very safe option overall because she handles the Intercept node so well. And if you watch this channel, you've heard me talk about how well Killmonger handles intercepts. And we don't even have to worry about Mighty Charge once we get Counterpunch up, because it will allow us to not only get that intercept, but just to really easily get openings against Spider-Ham, basically playing him stun immune. And then any bleeds we land are just gravy. So the hardest part of this fight is right here at the beginning. You'll notice I didn't heal to full because I still had the regen boost from the Tigra fight. But right here at the beginning, I need to get him to a bar of power, and I need him to throw it and not throw heavies. I swear, his AI and Mysterio were coded by the same person. But I need him to throw that special one, which is why I was hitting into his block. Now I have True Strike up, and I feel pretty good about the rest of this fight. Because I'm going to be spamming L1s, and therefore will be below a bar of power for most of this fight, he also shouldn't get too much spider nonsense. Notice how there we used Counterpunch to get not only the intercept, but also to block a hit intentionally, getting reverb up at the same time as True Strike, and thus doing a whole boatload of damage. Although I will note that it was still blunted by his taunt. There's also something weird about this node that I didn't realize, which is that, see right there, that taunt is reducing special damage, but it's not supposed to completely eliminate special damage, but it must be stacking with the protection node, and that's why my specials weren't doing any damage at all. So that surprised me. I hadn't run into that before, But at the same time, I wasn't really worried because we're 90 seconds in. Heavy was close. He was really trying to get me. But we're 90 seconds in, and he's more than halfway down. And more than that, we're at a full yellow bar. This is not that worrisome of a fight. It obviously could go poorly, but that's part of why I made a point of building to my L2 to get those indestructible charges up. And while I will burn one the next time I go for the Intercept, that's a nice little safety net in case he catches me with the heavy. Because you just know, even with Killmonger's crit resistance, it will crit. So might as well have it do no damage. We get that L2 off with the big damage numbers. Boom. Very efficient counter to Spider-Ham. Now, unfortunately, this next fight, I just forgot to record. I turned it off after Spider-Ham. I came and I took the Killmonger here on Polka Dot Power. You can see I didn't even need items for it because Killmonger was at a full yellow bar after Spider-Ham, but yeah, I just lost the recording. So, apologies about that. But here we have Tigra versus a Thing boss. I have taken Thing with Tigra several times before, including in the Grandmaster's Gauntlet. I had not gotten a chance to do this boss fight yet. However, the same basic theory holds here that you would have in any fight with Tigra against Thing. You're going to want to use heavies to counter his heavy, his special 1, his special 2. You're going to want to try to avoid him being at exactly 15 rock stacks, because Tigra can prevent his unstoppable buff, but not on that first hit, because that's the one that applies the neutralize. So you want to keep him at 13 or 14. 12 makes me nervous, because that's one heavy away from 15. But as much as possible, you're going to see me putting him at 13 or 14 stacks here, or 15 if I can get him to throw a special. And that's basically the whole game plan. Gonna try and keep those senses up as much as possible. See, there's 13. We hit him, he drops to 12. And then but that's okay because I throw the special 2, which does not have, a multiple of 3 hits. So I know that we're gonna be able to have him below that and see we're keeping him in a good spot. So there, I hit into his block, taking him to 14. Right here was not ideal. I believe there was something that happened during this fight where I got distracted, and I think it was around here. Because remember what I said, 12 makes me nervous? I wasn't paying attention. I should have comboed there, not heavied, because I put him at 15 under a bar of power, and I wasn't able to hit him again before neutralize wore off. That was 100% on me. That is exactly the thing that I said you did not want to do. However, as long as you just hit into his block, stay aggressive, we can keep those ruptures up. I also want to point out I'm running the Elsa synergy, which makes all of those ruptures last 50% longer against extra large champions, and thus is making our L2s hit a lot harder. But once those senses fell off, I knew I was just going to build to the L3 to get them back up, because that extra bar of power is more than made up for how much power I'm going to gain when I gain ruptures. See, that heavy gave me most of a bar right there. You really want the senses up at all times. But like I said, I messed up by heavying instead of comboing earlier. That one was also a little bit scary, but he was at least over a bar of power. And so I was ready to back off, but because the neutralize was still up when I found my opening, even though he was at 15, it was safe to hit in. So really the key is just make sure that you can hit in while neutralize is still up. And those of you who've been paying attention know that I just did the dumb thing again. I really don't know what was up with my headspace in this fight. But in a lot of ways, this is just proving how good Tigra is for this fight, right? Because no recoil tree masteries, and even when she messes up, she has the tools to regain control of the fight. So there I did not immediately go into a heavy after a special, although you sometimes can, because I knew that I would end up too close to him, and that would just be asking to get smacked in the face. I could have thrown it there with that spacing, but he had a bar, so we weren't going to do that. Notice throughout this fight, after my heavies, I've been running in after him. I call those wake-up intercepts. I'm not saying I came up with the term, but that's just the one I use. I don't always do it, because you need to be careful with it, with the timing, but it can really help if you end up throwing a heavy and he's below a bar of power, so he can't intercept you with a special, and you're trying to keep him back in his corner. So I highly recommend that if you're playing Tigra. Overall, I had my game plan fall apart twice in there, but you are always able to put it back together, so keep that in mind. And there it is. It was close. It was 2-1, but our battle group did come out of this ahead of For Loki's BG3, and so Vega has to rock Stealth Spidey as his profile pick for the rest of the season, which, as those of you who are paying attention know, has already passed, so I don't know how long he'll keep that up. It was a friendly bet anyway. On that note, obviously Kabam has ended the war season early because something in this recent update broke the way that parries and evades work for an awful lot of champs, for an awful lot of people. The way one of my BG mates described it is it just kind of feels like half of my champions weigh 200 pounds more at all times, and that feels pretty accurate to me. So I understand why they canceled the season. I do think it's appropriate to get full season rewards. However, it's still a real bummer because war right now is incredibly volatile. It was already close before this season, but then they made the map easier, bringing down the overall number of deaths and making each death count for more. And then that volatility was just made worse by the fact that they also nerfed how much you get for actually winning, making the tier you were in more important than your actual record and who you beat. I said as soon as they announced that was going to not be a good change, and it was going to lead to alliances with better records against better alliances placing lower than other alliances who just happened to start the season off in a better position in the tier list. And that's exactly what happened. So, pardon if this comes across as sour grapes, but my alliance did end up placing at the top of Platinum 2 this season. And while I won't say we didn't earn it, in a sense, because we lost a couple wars that we should not have, because clearly we just were not on the ball right off of the start. I really don't think that there's any chance with the way that we were trending that we would have ended up that low. And I just don't think that the tier system is very well balanced right now anyway. I think it doesn't make any sense for tier 1 to cut off at about, I think 22 alliances are in tier 1 last I heard, when most people at that level will tell you that there's not really a whole lot of room in terms of like skill and ability between the 12th or 13th best alliance and the 30th best alliance right now. And so it doesn't feel like it makes sense. And that's a bummer. But hopefully by ending the season early, this gives Kabam time to make some of the changes and improvements that they didn't going into this one, despite having that 4-week off season. I don't know. I am kind of hopeful. There's been a lot of really good content lately. I think that Summer of Pain has been very well designed. I think the Grandmaster Gauntlet was really cool. They're doing a lot of good things, and I know they've said they're working on war, so hopefully this gives them some time to get it right. Because it is still ultimately my favorite part of the game. And I really want to see it in a situation where it's all excitement, right? It's all that competitive excitement, pushing yourself, and not any of this where you're asking yourself, like, why is it scored that way? Why does that work? I also hope that anyone who had just left their alliance, because this was basically the last big window before the cutoff, if the season had gone its normal length. I know some people who were left out in the cold without any season rewards, and I hope that gets fixed, because that was not at all fair to them. It wasn't their fault that the game kind of stopped working. But again, to end on a hopeful note, I am cautiously optimistic that Season 28 will be better than Season 27 was. And until then, I look forward to the new Summer of Pain fights. Take care, all.